Greg, when I wonder, does God exist? I naturally have to think of what is this God that I'm wondering about? Mm-hmm. And one of the primary characteristics is the concept of omnipotence, all power.
Right.
What does this mean if we really think about it philosophically?
Well, it means God is all-powerful. He has all the power. He has all the say-so. Now,
he can do anything he wants.
Well, theoretically, yes. But now, immediately we get to another question, and that is, does God use all that power? Before creation, if you believe in creation, God has all the say-so. You can think of power as say-so, power to have your say. And if God's the only one that exists, God has all the say-so. But now God creates a world. And God could still have all the say-so if he created the kind of world where everything operated according to his will. But I believe, for a number of reasons, that God created a world where he gave free will to human beings and even to angels. And to the degree that God gives free will to human beings and angels, he gives them say-so. I get to have a say in what comes to pass. Not all the say, of course, but no one does. But I have some say, a domain of influence. And to the extent that God gives me free will and gives you free will and maybe angelic beings free will, to that degree, God limits his say-so. He still has the power to bring it all to an end and have exercise omnipotence. But if he created the kind of world where he wants there to be free agents, he can't do that. He limits himself. You can think of it like this. To the extent that he gives away free will, he gives away shares in omnipotence. And so we have some say-so over and against his say-so. So now God's will isn't the only will that gets done in this world. There's a lot of wills that affect what comes to pass.
So your approach significantly limits God's omnipotence.
It limits the exercise of God's omnipotence. Given the kind of world God creates.
So God made a choice some time back.
At the very beginning.
At the beginning. And this was the kind of world he wanted to do, where he, as you said, took some of his omnipotence and divested himself of it.
He gave away shares of omnipotence. He gave away say-so. But that's no different than saying this. If God decides he's going to create a triangle, he can't create a circle in that exact same space. A triangle is not a circle. Every this is not a that. And so there's God's omnipotence is constrained by, if you will, logical possibilities. But that's not really a constraint at all, because logical contradictions are not anything. So in God creating a world where there's free agency, he thereby, by definition, creates a world where he's not going to always get his way. And to that degree, it limits him. But it's not really a limit, because the alternative would be a logical impossibility. He couldn't create a world that has free agency and yet a world where he's guaranteed to always get his way.
What is the purpose of that?
Well, because without free will, there'd be no love. And I think love's the ultimate ideal, the ultimate goal.
God could not legislate that.
I don't think so. Think about this. I could create a microchip conceivably. Suppose I was a mad scientist. I could create a microchip that could control every neuron in my wife's brain. And I put that neuron in her brain while she's sleeping. It could mandate that she thinks all loving thoughts towards me, says all loving words towards me, and does nothing but perfectly loving deeds towards me. But that wouldn't be genuine love, and I would know it, even if she wouldn't, because I know that whatever she's doing to me and thinking about me, I'm really just doing to myself. So also, God could create a world where everybody thought loving thoughts and said loving words and did loving deeds. But it wouldn't be a world that genuinely had love. Because the only way you can get genuine love is by having a choice. My wife can genuinely love me because she has the possibility of not loving me. So also, if God wants a world where we learn how to love him, love ourselves, and love each other, there has to be a world where we have the possibility of not loving him, ourselves, and one another. And that means there's free will. And that means that God might not always get his way.
And that would mean that as God looks upon his existence, that the creation of these free will beings that have the possibility for love is a critical part of God's own reality.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. It means that God now, throughout this epic, this creation time, he has to work around agents other than himself. He just can't always declare a fiat. Here's what I want. But rather, in fact, this is why the Bible describes God's providence, his engagement with humans throughout history, as a function of his wisdom, more than a function of his power. Now, he still uses his power, but he also relies on his wisdom. And the reason is because he's created a world where he can't just decide to flex his muscle and get his way. He's got to outsmart his enemies. He's got to attain his objectives by using his creativity and his resourcefulness.
That sounds a little anthropomorphic.
Why think that? I mean, if in theology, one of the ways that you just say you disagree with something is accusing it of being anthropomorphic. The churches, the traditional view has had this idea of God as sort of this, God who just decrees all that's going to be done, and it all, functions out of his will. And if you disagree with that view, you're accused of being anthropomorphic. But my question would be, why believe in that picture of God in the first place? This God who simply decrees what's going to happen and it all comes to pass. That is not, I would argue, the God of the Bible. And so I don't feel like I'm being anthropomorphic by espousing this view.